Patrick Bennett, strategist at CIBC. Now, Patrick, I can't remember in recent times whether I've had a morning where I've not said the word Greece. It's been Australia. What's the read-through when it comes to investors?
Well, I think, yes, for Australia, I mean, certainly. I mean, any uncertainty is something that investors don't like to see. You know, we've had Rudd resigning, and there's a leadership challenge going to be Monday. People are thinking, well, what's it going to mean for the currency? Most particularly, the currency is obviously very high. It's very important for exporters here. Thinking, well, what's going to be that? How's it going to play out? I mean, it's a very thin majority.
Is it damaging the economy yet?
Certainly not damaging the economy right now. You know, I think people are looking forward to saying, well, look, what's going to happen with the deficit? What's going to happen with this forecast for surplus? You know, is this carbon tax going to go through? So there's, again, it's this uncertainty which is bothering people.
Okay, you know, does it make a difference if Kevin Rudd is in charge or Julia Gillard?
You know, right now I don't think it makes a great deal of difference. I think what people are going to talk about, though, is if there is an election going to be held, a national election going to be held, then certainly there's going to be some campaigning about the high Australian dollar.
Okay, I mean, but it does have its benefits, of course, as well, doesn't it? I mean, it means that you know, the miners do really well out of this on one side of the continent compared to the other side. So you do literally get this divide in the middle, don't you?
Absolutely. Look, there's a two-paced economy. There's the commodity states, Queensland and Western Australia, and the other states, New South Wales and Victoria, of the major ones. New South Wales and Victoria are also exporters in their own right. They're exporters of education, exporters of tourism, exporters of financial services. The high dollar is working against them. So you've really got this, this push and pull factor, and this is something that the RBA, is trying to deal with now. It's a very thin line, very hard line for them to tread.
Patrick, we were talking about Australia before. We were talking about the strength of the Aussie dollar. We've seen it just come off a little bit with the politics here, but got to say, is it a strong dollar now, or stronger dollar, I should say, because we've seen it gain against also the yen, sterling, and indeed even the euro?
Look, I think it is a strong dollar story. I think we're seeing that. I think that the US economy is going to outperform this year. If we look at US against Europe or US against Japan, then the US is growing while Europe is in recession and Japan is hasn't had any growth for so long. So I think the dollar is going to be strong. That is going to impact Australia and the currency, currencies like that. We would expect the Australian dollar to actually be an outperformer when the US economy
is. But isn't it just grossly overvalued?
The Australian dollar?
Yeah.
Look, I think it's at least fairly valued here.
Really?
Yeah. Look, yes, I think it's fairly valued here. I think what we need to look at is...
Most people say it's about 90 US cents is what its fair value is.
Well, that's right. And I think if you look at forecasts, I think everyone is picking it to go lower, and I think that's one of the reasons why it hasn't been going lower. I think it's strong for a good reason, because it's had very strong commodity exports. It's the economy which is leveraged into Asia, leveraged into the China story. But if we look forward from here and we see growth in China moderating...
we've got possibly a new forecast growth at 7.5%. That's what maybe actually we talked about at the next People's Congress.
Well, yes, I mean, I read that story this morning, but interestingly, the current five-year plan targets growth of 7%, so I'm not quite sure where the 7.5% comes from.
Yeah.
7.5% was the previous five-year plan, and growth was, what, 8.5%, so... I'm not sure. I think, in fact, China is actually focusing on growth rather than inflation. I think we've heard that from Yuan last year. We've heard about rebalancing or fine-tuning policy. I think China's continued to grow, but certainly at a slower pace than it was in the last couple of years.
Perhaps a more healthy pace as well, one could argue as well. A non-inflationary pace is what one can argue here as well.
Look, absolutely. I mean, China borrowed from the following five-year plans to boost their investment infrastructure at a time when exports were weak in 2008, 2009. That cycle has finished. What we're finding now is, well, what we come to now is global growth, global demand is weak. So exports are slowing right across Asia, including out of China. Investment cycle has come to its end, so we're necessarily going to see slower growth.
Quickly here as well, I mean, we mentioned the strength of the US economy. I mean, has it surprised you in the last 4 months or so how the data's changed?
Well, I mean, the data's been good. It seems to have flattened off just a little bit in the last couple of weeks. But no, not particularly surprising, because the dollar's been very weak. That's helped their export sector. The Fed was very early in injecting this liquidity, which we think is a good thing. They've been trying to get the economy moving by injecting this liquidity. We're seeing the benefits of that now. It's almost like the austerity in Europe versus the lax monetary conditions in the US, and what's winning out at the moment, it's the US. Growth is better there.
And I'm going to ask Zeb to start this one off, because I've been talking already to Patrick.
Well,
So drop you in it.
You'll rope me in. Okay, we've been focusing all morning, of course, on Australia and just this drama that's unfolded over the past 24 hours. I spoke earlier with the CEO of Woodside Petroleum. I asked him if this undermines the corporate image of Australia. He says no, but you have to imagine that executives there are kind of sick of this, just like the public.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, there's only been a very thin majority. I mean, operating with the with the Greens, with the independents as well. So I think it's uncertainty, and it's what we were speaking about earlier. Uncertainty is always bad for markets. Companies don't like to see that. Investors don't like to see that. So as soon as it's out of the way, the better.
But Kevin Rudd hasn't officially declared his candidacy. He hasn't gone out there to even put that stake in the ground. He's alluded to it, of course, but what do you think is going to happen next? What are the next steps we're going to see out of him?
I mean, that's right. It's interesting, isn't it, that we know there's a vote on Monday, but we don't know actually who's going to be put up. We all assume it's going to be Rudd, but we haven't heard that. But certainly he must have his people lined up. He must have done the numbers, because otherwise, as you say, it would be crazy not to.
Do we even know when he's coming back from the United States?
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to get the odds.
He's going to announce his candidacy back in Washington, D.C.
If he's going to be back by this weekend and he's in Washington, he better be on the plane now, right?
Long odds on Julia Gillard to hold on to a job, apparently. $2.92 for her to be Labour leader at the next election. That's what we have.
Yeah, look, I think the next election for sure. I mean, if they held an election tomorrow, I mean, Labour would get challenged.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Riders from Queensland, a lot of support there, and.
Well, this is what Tony Abbott was talking about, wasn't he, earlier, David? He was saying that this is, of course, he would say it's a great nation, but it's a bad government leading it and all that.
He has no confidence, is what he said. Yeah.
And do you think that's being reflected in the Aussie dollar? I mean, because in general, the trend that we're seeing, at least this year, is that the high yielding currencies they are unwinding those long positions. The Aussie dollar has come up its 108 levels already. We're seeing that as well with the Kiwi dollar. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, look, I think this uncertainty is just playing into it. I think the Australian dollar is already at high levels now. So I think investors looking and saying, well, look, do I want to be investing? Do I want to be putting more money into Australia at these levels given this uncertainty? The answer to that is no. So I think there's other factors at play, but I think for now I think we're going to see the Australian dollar underperform. It's certainly underperform until this uncertainty is.
It was completely unchanged this whole morning, really. I was
$1.47 for Kevin Rudd to win.
Wow. How would you evaluate Gillard's performance? Many people saying it was the best performance in her career in terms of promulgating to the public. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it was always a bit of the news conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think she's done well. I'm not sure that she has the confidence of the people and the confidence of everyone in the Parliament as well. So that's the issue.
Is the elephant in the room also the carbon tax?
Well, yes, that's the elephant in the room. It's certainly as concerns the getting back to surplus. Companies don't want that. Companies want to have certainty on that. Getting back to surplus has that as a cornerstone of that. Certainly, if there was an election held tomorrow, then that's going to be an issue, and no one's going to be getting it. No one ever gets elected on the basis of introducing a new tax.
That's true.
Well, this all plays into Tony Abbott's hand, though. I mean, he must be sitting back in amusement, because at the end of the day, this internal squabbling in the Labour Party just makes his position all the more attractive.
Absolutely. It's hard to know just exactly what is going on. Why has Rudd done this? Why is he standing up? Because we know there's a thin majority. We know without the support of the independents, the government just can't operate. So it looks like we're heading towards a federal election.
So we have a change in leadership of one form or the other then coming up possibly in Australia, but we got it in China, France. We also have it in the United States, of course.
While this was going on with
50% or thereabouts, world's GDP will see some sort of change in governance through the course of this year. Is that destabilizing in any way?
Yeah, I think again it's this uncertainty. People are just not sure what is coming up, and let's not mention it too much. But there's an election somewhere else.
Russia as well. Yeah.
There's an election also in Greece, I think, in April as well. So we have all these things.
Said the G word.
We have all these things going. Yes, it's uncertainty. Markets, investors don't like uncertainty.
It's remarkable, though, how we haven't talked about Greece. We just mentioned it. I mean, as though it's all done and dusted, and it clearly, according to everybody we talked to, well, it isn't, is it?
Look, it's not done dust. It's going to drag on for some time. I think it's good. We all think it's good that it's out of the headlines. I mean, there's been far too much focus on what's been happening there, probably at the detriment of what's going on elsewhere, that there hasn't been enough attention on issues in other parts of the world that we should be focusing on. And fortunately, or otherwise, we're getting to that now. We're starting to look at these different events.
last year we saw many Asian CEOs look to Europe, look to Greece in terms of acquiring these assets and a big kind of asset swoop. Do you think that's going to decline in 2012, given the fact that these issues, these uncertainties around Greece, while we do have clarity, are going to take a while, to your point, to actually get to some type of understanding in terms of implementation?
Look, I think people are still going to be looking to invest, and I think Greece or Europe or wherever it might be are still looking to do that. But I think it's price discovery. We need to get to a point where either the asset prices fall to a level or the currency in which they're denominated falls to a level where we can get people to participate. And I think that's been the same thing if we look at US housing or any sort of thing that's over the last few years. We just don't have that yet, and that's where we need to move towards.
Yeah, let's look at your currency bet. Let's change the topic a little bit, because very interesting. I was looking at your research, and your biggest bet in Asia is the Chinese Yuan.
Yes.
And among the people that we have talked to here, the Yuan will probably slow down in terms of appreciation this year, 2-3% tops. And I guess if you look at the macro picture, the reasons why they appreciated that quite fast last year, you had inflation, of course, they had combating imported inflation. I haven't looked at the balance of payments, but all these other things are actually not telling us that we will see more appreciation for the Yuan this year.
Yeah, look, I think the Yuan is undervalued. I think on any metric, people will tell you it's undervalued. As far as exports go, China doesn't compete on the level of its currency. It's competed on its level of wages. Obviously, they're going up as well, but China can sell regardless of the price. But what we're going to see this year, what we believe we'll see this year, is this fine-tuning, this rebalancing of policy, which Premier Yuan has told us about. What we believe that's going to include is further cuts in the required reserve ratio, potentially a cut in the benchmark interest rate, but the balancing of that is continuing appreciation of the currency. So we think it's a great trade, and recommend investors to stay on the track of that, of looking for further appreciation in
longer term. It does make sense. Yeah.
Yes.
David took it to China, so I have a follow-up question. Premier Wen Jiabao recently signaled that he's going to focus on inequality, pollution, as well as financial instability rather than growth. What do you make of those comments? Of course, in a couple of weeks, he has his big version of his State of the Union address. What do you think of that?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a repeat or a rerun of the current 5-year plan that's going on, and so yes, he will speak about that in the State of the Union. I think what we need to look at in China, that they're trying to reorient growth towards consumption. They're trying to be a good global player. They want to talk about the environment. They want to talk about spreading the wealth from the southeastern seaboard into the internal, into the northwest.
So we'll see if they can do that, right? Quality versus the speed.
Well, of course, it's not. No one would say it's easy. It's a very admirable goal for them, and of course we'll see how they go.